Welcome to My Psychedelic Roots, a podcast of conversations with people from a broad swath of lived experience to explore their psychedelic beginnings or roots, what led them to start using psychedelics, what those early experiences were like, and how those roots have impacted their life's unfolding. My name is Amy Bartlett, and it is my hope that these stories, generously shared by my guests, offer perspective and insight into the lived reality of psychedelic experiencing. And so whoever, wherever, or whenever you are, welcome. I'm glad you're here. In today's episode, I sit down with Myriah MacIntyre, a friend and Ph.D. candidate studying clinical psychology at the University of Ottawa, who focuses her research on the impact of traditional medicines and psychedelics on healing racial trauma. In our conversation, Myriah shares about her own lived experience as a Black Caribbean-Indigenous lesbian woman and how her identities have intersected with her research choices, but also with her own personal psychedelic unfolding. Myriah's path towards exploring the potential of psychedelics for the treatment of racial trauma started long ago. Growing up in a small Canadian city and attending a Lutheran private school where she felt isolated due to her race and sexuality. As she shares, what carried her through then, and continues to now, is her connection to spirituality and to music, which is a special relationship she talks about with us, both as a musician and as someone who has experienced chromesthesia from a very young age. I've worked with Myriah for several years on different projects together, and I know that in her clinical training and research, she prioritizes providing compassionate and equitable care to her clients who are surviving the systemic structures of sociocultural inequity. This priority to serve others well is born out of her own experiences and is supported by what I experience to be a deep grounding in her own self-acceptance and a balance between deep empathy and confident self-agency. As our conversation unfolds, Myriah's rootedness in gratitude and acceptance also shines through so beautifully, and it was a pleasure to spend time together listening to her weave together the threads of her life's unfolding. And so, let's hear more about Myriah's psychedelic roots. Well, welcome, Myriah. It's lovely to have you here.
Thank you.
So we're talking today about your first psychedelic experience, and I'm really grateful that you were open to sharing your story. As we jump into the conversation today, I will have read your bio out for folks, but what do you think it's important that folks know about you and your life before moving into exploring your first psychedelic experience?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think something I'll share is just about my backgrounds or my identities, because I think the intersecting identities I carry parallel to my psychedelic experiences. So for myself, I'm Black, I'm Indigenous, I'm queer, I'm also a researcher, I enjoy skateboarding. That's just a bit about myself.
Thank you for sharing that. And so with that background and moving back into your sense of awe and wonder as a child, if we were to trace a thread from your childhood to your first psychedelic experience, where might that thread begin?
Yeah, so in terms of psychedelic experience, I think what first started, I guess, that spirituality aspect. I was quite young, probably 6, 7. I started recalling certain dreams I would have, like vivid dreams or like premonitions related to spirituality. And I was confused by them, but it wasn't like an eerie sense or like I was afraid. It was like, oh, there's something more to this experience. I don't know what this means, but that's where it may have started.
Yeah. How did those experiences impact your way of seeing the world? What felt true to you as a kid?
But yeah, I guess the thing that I remember standing out, which also coincides with my psychedelic experiences, which is just the feeling of certain vibrations. And I guess specifically, I was taught to play the piano, but I was also taught to play it by ear. And there was just a certain sense of like, oh, if I play this note or this chord, I feel a certain way, or others feel a certain way. And that's kind of parallel to the energy work or just how that ties in with like psychedelic experiences and the energy in the room. So that's a thread, I guess, from my childhood to now.
Yeah. And it may be different as an adult, but I'm curious, as a kid, where did you feel that energy? Did you just know you were feeling? I'm just curious.
Yeah, so I'd say like physically on my body, I would feel it like goosebumps, for example, would be the feeling. Sometimes I would become like emotional in different ways based on like what I was playing or what I could hear being played. And then something that I'm able to channel more strongly now or since my psychedelic experiences, but was present in my childhood and also my father experiences this is like the chromesthesia, so seeing like colors with certain sounds. So I think that's what would be described as like a psychedelic experience, but it was just something that I experienced, which then helped me play instruments. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And do you still experience that sound and color relationship today?
Yeah, I do. And it's for lack of a better word, it's very intense. So because of that, I try to be mindful of like what I'm listening to, like especially during psychedelic like ceremonies when there's like live music. It's it just feels all encompassing. It's a great feeling. It's just like I feel like a soundboard in a way, like with the frequencies. So
Yes. You know, your relationship to music and energy sounds intense today as an adult. Was it ever scary as a child, or were you confused about what you were experiencing?
I felt like it was like a place of comfort as a child. Like, despite what I was feeling, I feel like that was like a constant. I could go to the piano and I could play these certain things or play these certain chords, and it was, say, comforting in a way, or maybe it was paralleling what I was feeling. So it was kind of like an alignment.
Yeah, it's a great way of putting it. And so, thinking about those very embodied experiences that you were having on a parallel track, or maybe it's the same track, I'm not sure, but what was your relationship to spirituality or wonder as a child?
Yeah. So I'm I guess I'll speak about 2 things. So, initially, I was raised in a like, it was like a private Lutheran Christian school. From the age of, like, 2, actually, I was enrolled in that school, and I was there till I was around, like, 13 or 14. Then I was like, I need to go to a public school for various reasons. So, I was introduced to, like, religion in this one particular way, but I started to see spirituality and religion like, spirituality to me is, like can be a part of religion, but I just got to a point where I was like, "I don't need this thing or these certain practices or to go to this specific church," for example, to feel that connection to whatever this source is, and I think there were just too many inconsistencies within, like, the doctrine that was being taught where I was like, "I don't know if I can follow this blindly or just put all my faith in this book, but I can still take the spirituality out of it." Like, that's a constant, and that's my own relationship, and I don't need this external, like, validation to have that, so, yeah.
How did your family receive your curiosity and your sort of wanting to open up your understandings or exploration of religion and spirituality?
Yeah, I think there's mixed opinions for sure. Even in my, like, own household, my mother was part of that church, and my father was more, like, Baptist or Pentecostal, so even though it's still Christianity, there's differences there.
Mhm.
I'd say with my grandmother, I've always felt very connected to her, and she's had these dreams or just some of these experiences as well. So there was more of a, like, we're just alike in that way. It was more of like a comfort. But I think when it comes to challenging anything that is close to someone, that can create conflict. So, yeah, I'd say there was some of that with certain family members when it came to me being, like, 9 years old, and I'm like, "If this is true, then how is this true?" Just questioning things, and that's fair because the adults didn't have the answer, and we still don't have the answer to these, like, religious-based questions.
Mhm.
Yeah, looking back, I can see where some of my questions were like irritating to adults in my life, and I can understand why.
That's both accepting of them and of you. Just out of curiosity, did you grow up in an environment where psychedelics were discussed, either positively or negatively? Or what was your perception of them?
Yeah, no, I don't recall. I will say, like, in the private school that I was a part of, which was a very small community, like, I think there's around, like, 90 kids, and that itself was kind of isolating. Just in general, like, drugs were bad, like, abstinence, drugs are bad, like, that is their medicine, is what I would say. I didn't really hear about psychedelics or witness them until maybe I was, like, 19 or 20 in university. Like, until then, I didn't even, like, see it in, like, media, like, wasn't really the thing. I think there was more conversation about, like, weed. Yeah.
So psychedelics weren't on your radar at all. And so, was there a particular moment or conversation or encounter that made you become aware of them or that made you start to question whether they might be something that you want to explore or experience?
Yeah. I think this in itself could sound like a psychedelic or an experience in a way or just more spiritual to me. There was a bit of, like, a domino effect that I feel like is how I'm even here at the University of Ottawa.
Wow.
So, I'll start with my first year of university. I attended Western. I just had a lot of experiences of racism there, so I decided to leave, and I went to the University of Windsor, and then COVID hit, so I was getting back into skateboarding again, and that's the simple answer so far. And while I was skateboarding at a park, I saw another person for the first time who was also Black and queer skateboarding. So I decided to speak with them. We became like good friends, and they spoke often about the University of Ottawa. I'd never heard of the University of Ottawa before, to be honest. Growing up in Windsor, I heard of Carleton, but hadn't heard of the University of Ottawa. And they also did shrooms. So, I didn't really realize at the time what they were experiencing, but just being around that was like my first exposure to psychedelic substances. And then they spoke with the University of Ottawa, and then I started researching it, and I was like, "Whoa, there's this lab there. This is interesting." And that is the same 3 months in which I applied to the program and then later got into the program. So it was kind of like it's kind of like a spiritual domino effect for me how we're even, I guess, having this conversation today. Yeah.
Wow. Pulling apart some of the pieces that circled those few months where you encountered another person who you felt connected to, allied to, mirrored with, that you encountered psychedelics and you encountered a place to go and study, like, woof, that's a lot. So I'm curious about skateboarding. I'm curious about what role you feel like skateboarding has played in your life before and in that moment. Was that part of the sacredness of this transition and navigating these choices?
I think so. Often people speak about meditation and how you can get there through meditation, which is possible. For me, my meditation is skateboarding, and it also mirrors, at least in my experiences of I could even specifically talk about, like, psilocybin. There's, like, that turmoil or, like, that feeling in your stomach, and you're like, "Oh, am I gonna accept? Am I gonna go forward? Am I gonna go through this journey?" And when I'm skateboarding, there's some of that when you're trying to learn something new or just commit to something. But then also when I'm just freely just skateboarding around or whatnot, that just feels like that flow state that you can get to through meditation or through a psychedelic experience or through playing music. So I think they are interconnected.
Yeah. The flow state, even thinking about dreams, like the skateboarding, the music, like there's a lot of being here and also being open to what's happening around you in those sorts of states. That's really beautiful.
Yeah, certainly. Mhm.
Yeah. And so you met this person and they talked about their psychedelic use. What did you think about? Because presumably drugs were not something that you were particularly interested in or felt safe about. So how did that move from hearing about them the first time to thinking about, well, this might be something for me?
Yeah, I think my perception on, say, like drugs or really anything that's outside of that, like doctrine, is very like black and white until I went to high school. And then I was like, oh, there's reasons why people engage in certain things. And that helped me have a new perspective. And I feel like I was always seeking that because something about that way of knowing wasn't congruent with myself. And I didn't know why, but I was like, this doesn't align with me. So then when I was like witnessing someone else take the mushrooms, I just was more like curious, like, what does that do? And there was like some of those conversations. I started just Googling some things, but it wasn't really until I moved here in 2021 to Ottawa that I really started to understand what these substances are and like the historical uses and yeah, just the history behind it.
Yeah. And so, what moved you from witnessing your friend, doing some Googling, getting deeper into understanding the cultural, historical, spiritual, therapeutic, all these different ways? How did that lead to your first psychedelic experience?
Right. I think for me, moving different cities, or I've moved to different cities in Ontario for school, but like I've mentioned, the constant in my life is something arts based. So I had my first psychedelic experience after I moved here, and I was in the lab for a couple months, more recreationally. And then I was like, oh, this is the thing that will help people, will help myself. You know, people should be allowed to use freely, to reclaim. So I think that first like psychedelic experience in a more recreational setting was very eye opening and like transformative.
So, because you did all of this preparation and thinking about it beforehand, how did you go into that recreational experience?
Yeah, I honestly was scared. I was like, what is going to happen to me?
Yes.
Mm. I had no clue. I was scared, but what helped me were those things that have grounded me in my entire life. So I think I was drawing at some point, and then at one point I was playing the piano, but it was like I was watching myself play the piano.
Yes.
It was pure flow state, and it was one of the best experiences of my life. So, that fear, I think, was normal, or I knew it was normal. It was kinda just like trying a new trick on a skateboard. It's like, "Oh, I could fall right now and really hurt myself, or I could commit, and it's okay to fall." So, whether I realized that in the moment or not, I think that was the thinking behind me going into my experience.
Yeah. And were you with another person? Were you by yourself?
So I was with one other person who also had experience with psilocybin.
And did you both take it, or was that person sober?
Yeah, we both took it. I don't know the amount that they took. I believe the amount I took was like a gram or a gram and a half.
Nice. And it sounds like you were in a safe space. There was a piano available, and you stayed in that space the whole time?
Yeah, so we were initially in the living room in the house I was living in, and we had like essential oils, like different scents. And
Yes.
I just remember smelling different ones, and then different memories were coming to my forefront, and I was like, "Whoa, this is really cool." So, at that point, I was like, "This this is fun." Like, it's okay to be afraid and, like, have some fun with it, have some playfulness with it, which
Yes.
also then I guess that way of thinking translated to being in ceremonies where it's like there's moments where it's fun, and then there's moments where it's like, "Okay, you gotta sit down and do the work." So, I was there, and then in my room is where I have, like, my piano, where I was like, "Okay, I can go there and just relax."
Yeah. And so the come up, was the essential oil piece part of the come up for you, or?
I think part of it was my mouth got really, really dry, so then I
Mhm.
was like, "I need water," and I remember drinking the water and then immediately, like, my mind went somewhere else and I saw a seed and then the seed sprouted into like this big plant. And I was
Mm.
like, whoa, this is not just water. And that was like, I guess part of the come up for me. And then I was like, okay, so there's something going on with my senses or just my sensory experiences. So then we shifted to the sense. And then I was like, okay, let's shift to like hearing music or feeling the music as well. Cause I was also like seeing things. So I was like, okay, it was a bit of like sensory play in that way.
Yeah. Well, and thinking back to your childhood and the relationship between color and sound, your senses have always been linked, it sounds like from a very young age. And so to use that opportunity to explore your senses in a non-ordinary state feels really natural and I presume quite profound.
Yeah. Yeah. It was comforting.
Mhm. You described that experience of playing piano and being in that flow state to be one of the most beautiful experiences that you've had. What did you learn from that experience?
That if you truly just allow yourself to be present, things are fine. You know, you may make a mistake or there really aren't any mistakes. If there has doesn't have to be a certain order or way of following things. That was something that I guess I had to unlearn from growing up in such a strict religious school where it's like, you know, ABC, gotta be in this order. If you're not in this order, this is wrong. So music to me always was contradicting that. And then when I tied in the psychedelic experience, I was like, whoa, just let things flow and let things be. There's no box to fit in here.
Yeah. And so, how did those insights and that experience translate into your evolving spirituality and understanding of yourself and the world around you?
Yeah. I think it helped me with more, especially from the retreats, like, I think it helped me with more compassion and grace in situations, whether that's to myself or to others,
Mhm.
especially with, like, my parents or family members for choices they may have made or and how that affected me, and I'm like, "Okay, I can see the larger perspective here of maybe there was, like, this intention, and maybe it looks this way, but it just reminded me that I'm not all-knowing." So, yeah. How about you?
Yes.
Yeah.
And what is your relationship to God or to the universe or to what is nowadays?
Yeah, so I'm not religious, and I'd say I haven't been religious since I was, like, 13, so it's been a while,
Mhm.
but the spirituality aspect is a constant for me. I do still engage in certain, like, spiritual practices or cleansings or things like this just to feel peaceful or fine. I that's primarily my relationship, but talking more about, like, the ceremonies and stuff, the spirituality has definitely opened up more through the ceremonial context.
Yeah, well, tell me if you're open to sharing, what is your relationship to psychedelics today and how have you been working with them?
Yeah, so my relationship with them, yeah, I feel a lot of gratitude to even be working in this space, to be honest, even find myself to getting here, like, from, you know, being a child in this private school system to now in this research area. So that in itself, I'm grateful for. But
Mhm.
my current relationship is, like, through work, through my research, but then on a more personal note, when I'm on the mat, it's a very intense experience for me, I would say. In the last 2 retreats I've been at, there was connection to, like, ancestors or speaking to certain ancestors, even to my late grandmother that I've not
Mhm.
met, but was from Jamaica. So it has extended to other realms, maybe realms I was seeing in my dreams, and they kinda coincide with what I see on the mat. It kinda just makes sense now, like, it's a more of a full circle moment with the psychedelic experiences. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm. Do you think that there's a particular longing or question that psychedelics and your psychedelic experiencing is answering for you?
Maybe a theme that arises for me is about connection.
Mm.
Like, as a child, I felt very disconnected from my surroundings because it didn't look like me. And also, even in spaces where maybe others looked like me, I was like, "I'm distinctively different because I'm gay." So I always felt this, like, othering, and maybe at times I was just segregating myself in some way or concealing some parts of myself. So, I think to now with the retreats or with the psychedelic experiences, I feel very connected in the room and, like, very accepted, and that then has translated into how I feel, like, in my adulthood. So, in my childhood, I was probably seeking this, like, connection or to be understood, but now that I really understand myself, it's like I'm not seeking this acceptance in a way. I'm more just living as myself, and then you find along the way as you do the things you're doing, whether that's like skateboarding or playing music or whatever, you find people who align with those different parts of you.
Yes. And maybe you've already answered this question, but I'm curious, how has your relationship to your race or to your sexuality changed?
Yeah. Hmm. I'll start with sexuality. As a child, I think everyone in my family always knew I was gay. I've always just been gay. But I think in more my teenage years, I was like, "Oh, is this something to be ashamed of?" Or I was just coming out of that, like, religious thing,
Yeah.
that religious guilt,
Yes.
and putting that guilt down and being like, "This is not mine to carry anymore. This is others' perceptions maybe, and I gotta accept that." So that shifted in my teenage years. Now I'm kind of, like, unapologetic about it. I If people express homophobia, I'm like, it couldn't even get to me at any rate. I'm just more like, "Okay, at least I know where you stand, like, appreciate your honesty."
Mhm.
Um, when it comes to race, I yeah, like, I feel like I've consistently felt this sense of pride growing up in again, and because I Windsor in itself, it's more white, but there's Detroit there, so it's not like you're not exposed to different cultures or backgrounds, but specifically within that one school I was in, and that's kinda like your whole life, and the people you associate with, it was very clear that people are treated differently based on race and based on color, like, just colorism.
Mhm.
So, that was something in terms of, like, tolerating whiteness or not speaking up in certain situations because of fear of whatever consequence, that was something to unlearn, and I believe I'm like a 180 from then to now with especially with the work I'm doing.
Yes.
So that's, I guess, how it's in terms of race, like, how that's shifted over time. Mhm.
Yeah. It's powerful.
Certainly. Yeah.
I love how you described part of your work with psychedelics to revolve around connection, connecting with others, but it also sounds very deeply connecting with yourself and renegotiating your acceptance of self.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm curious, as we begin to wrap up our conversation together, Mariah, is there anything that you wish you had have known before you started going down this path with psychedelic substances?
Hmm. I'm going to say no.
Mhm.
In ter I I guess I'll speak about my relationship with the mushroom, like, I appreciate that the mushroom pushes me, but does not tell me what to choose or how to get there, how to get to this knowing or understanding. So, had I been, like, privy to other information that may have shifted me somewhere else or to something else. So, there's not really something that I'd want to know or have before it. I'm just grateful that I'm even able, like, in this lifetime to experience it and work with the mushroom as well.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And do you have any advice for other folks who are curious about exploring understanding?
Yeah, for sure. I think it would be helpful to think about what's comforting for you, like just in your everyday life, and maybe find that if there isn't something, and try to integrate that in some way into your psychedelic experience, whether that's even if that's like writing for you or journaling is really helpful. Just have a book there and a pen. And maybe it won't make sense as you read it later, but in the moment, it could be very freeing to just write. So just having those like places of comfort around you as you're going into this thing that's unknown.
I love that. That's such a bookend in the way that you described that flow state as a child, and those experiences being so comforting. Is there anything else that you'd like to share or any other lessons or insights that you'd like to offer as we close our conversation today?
Yeah, I wanna yeah, I guess I wanna share, like, I feel so much gratitude and be able to attend these ceremonies, these retreats, and I hope we can get to a place where these things are more accessible. If it wasn't for, like, my supervisor, the lab I'm in, like, all of that support, I would not be in this position today, and I also know there's some ancestral work going on that even led me here today to even be alive today. So yeah, I just hope that through maybe the work I'm doing, through the work everyone else is doing, everyone's doing their part, and hopefully we can make this more accessible so that more people can experience these things.
Uh, I'm glad that you've gotten to experience them and continue to, and I'm glad that you're doing the awesome work that you're doing to build more equity and understanding of this psychedelic space. So thank you.
Thank you.